So welcome to the Batten Podcast, where we build mental resilience, fortitude, and faith through encouraging spiritual growth and maturity. My name is Damian Batten, and I'm so thrilled that you joined me today. Today is a very, very special day because I have my brother Josh with me. Josh Bramble! I just had to do it.
What am I in a boxing ring?
No, I wish I had the Chicago Bulls music. It'd be like, dun dun dun. I think that's how it goes anyway.
You can have it later.
I will.
You're now listening to the Batten Podcast. The Batten Podcast. Bless God, the devil's a liar. God's throw higher. 24/7 connection, no phone wire.
So, welcome to season 2 of the Batten Podcast. I'm with Josh Bramble, an amazing man of God, and I'm just so excited that we get to talk about a very special subject that's near and dear to my heart. Trauma and first responders. I got a lot of friends who are first responders. I got a lot of family who is first responders and military personnel. And so we're going to jump into a little bit of that today. But let's introduce you to the people, to the village. All right, Josh Bramble, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a child of the King.
Okay, there you go. Starting off right on.
I didn't know that early on. It wasn't until 1999 that I realized I was. But moved to North Carolina 4 years ago, and just love this place. The involvement we've had with you in different settings, and kind of a little bit about me in this topic. I got into the mental health field in 1996 after I got sober after a 10-year run-in with alcohol, and I got sober. And so once I got into the field, I worked with juveniles in a treatment center, went back to school in the 98 to get my master's degree in counseling, started my first counseling practice in 2000. And in 2002, I realized in the community I lived in Colorado that first responders didn't really have much in the way of mental health support. Yeah. And so I got on with the sheriff's department there, got trained in critical incident stress debriefing, worked with them for 10 years, doing all sorts of stuff related to that within my private practice. And then in 2013, I became a first responder myself. Volunteer firefighter, did that for just under 8 years until we moved here. And then almost 3 years ago, I started working as a part-time firefighter with a local fire department. And my whole role is to be among the guys and gals and provide a mental health piece, and also just continue to enjoy my first responder dreams.
I hear you.
So a little bit about me.
So your first responder dreams, did you always want to be a firefighter?
I realized there's a picture of me in my office driving a fire truck, and I'm not sure if I'm 5 or if I'm 40 something, but it was when I got trained on driving engines, and I've got this grin on my face, and I remember being a kid wearing those little plastic fire helmets. Yeah. So I think I had an epiphany at that moment that was a childhood dream.
Wow.
So
wow. Well, man, not everybody get to live their childhood dream, so that's awesome, man. That's awesome. So I like to ask silly questions, right?
Yeah.
Not all of them going to be silly, but I didn't know how old you were when we, you put me on the spot and said, "How old do I look?" And I felt really hot for a second, but
that's called menopause.
Yeah, you know what? Okay, here.
No,
so there's a guy by the name of, I'm gonna give a shout out because I love the dude. He's a prophet. His name is Tomi Arami. I think that's how you pronounce it. But he just did a sermon and it's called Men on Pause. Anyway, that's pretty awesome.
That fits.
But so you revealed to me that you're actually significantly older than that. So you ain't got to tell everybody your age, but I thought you were 45. So there you go, and you are older than that. But
well, it means I have my son at 14 because I have a 31-year-old son, a 24-year-old daughter, and a 5-year-old daughter.
All right, so that's a clue to how old he really is. But
46.
I was like, wait, what? But I want to ask this. If you would finish the statement, I remember when.
Yeah. I remember when life was a lot easier in the world we lived in, and people weren't as stressed, overwhelmed, and traumatized, and wondering where the next bad thing's going to come from.
Wow, that's really deep. I was like, I remember when gas was 99 cents. You know.
Okay, let me. No. Hold on. I remember when I could fit into jeans that were a 40-inch waist.
Okay.
Actually, no, 38.
38. All right. No, but that's you make a great point though. I'm not, I feel like I'm just really walking out manhood, and I'm 36. I just had a birthday, so I'm 36, and I feel like I'm just walking out manhood. And I can't remember when gas was 99 cents, or 98 cents, but man, I just feel like things were a lot more simpler. I remember when active shooter in schools were unheard of. I remember when you would fight, but you would live to fight another day. It didn't end in gun violence. And so those are the things that I remember when. So, to add to what you're saying, man, I'm with you 100%. When life was much simpler. Yeah. Is there anything, besides a firefighter, was there anything that you wanted to do when you were young?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I wanted to do was be involved in the TV and film.
Okay.
And so at a young age, got a video camera at a young age, would make short movies and did broadcasting stuff. And that was a dream all the way up until I almost finished college. And then when I got sober, when I got sober, I realized Hollywood was probably not the place for me.
Yeah.
And so that's when everything shifted. But I still love, I haven't used a camera in a long time, but photography, all that stuff. And so, that's something I remember.
Oh, wow, man. I wouldn't say that it was a dream for me, but it's something I was very interested in. So my church, I grew up in church, so I was like the sound guy, right? Mm-hmm. But I was a teenager. I was the sound guy. I was responsible for recording and everything, setting up the mics and stuff. That was pretty awesome. I also played the drums, so I did a lot of tearing up. But so I felt like when in the middle school, I forget what the name of the class, I think it's called technology or something like that.
Yeah.
But in this technology classroom, they had a legit studio, a radio studio, and they had mics and everything set up. They had, cassette tapes. Some people probably don't even know what that is that's watching this, but they had cassette tapes.
I started out on 8-track tapes.
And I don't know what that is, but but I mean, so we had cassette tapes, and you put that in, and we would record. We would play music from the radio, and then we would actually create our own radio show. And who knew? All these years later, here I am with a podcast.
Your own radio
show. So that's pretty cool. Let's jump into some of this trauma and first responders.
Sounds good.
You and I, we had a brief conversation, and it just flowed. It just mashed, and I'm so excited to share some of the things that we already kind of talked about, because I think it's going to be good and healthy for those who are watching. The first question that I want to ask you is, from your experience, what are some common types of trauma that first responders face, and how do these experiences impact their mental health over time?
Yeah, I would say that a lot of first responders, one, on the visual end, they experience a lot of death and destruction. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, they watch the falling apart of families from an accident or from another type, or losing a house in a fire. So it's almost like they see and experience relational trauma, visual trauma, physical trauma in terms of what they put their bodies through, their minds through, and then also vicarious trauma, which is the idea that you didn't actually experience the trauma, but you're watching somebody close to you go through it, and it's like a shared experience.
Yeah.
And so there are so many different levels to it, and even though what could be traumatic for one person might not be for another, it kind of runs the gamut.
Yeah. That's crazy. You were sharing that, and I was thinking, I told you briefly, I was a police officer. I think I did anyway. I was a police officer probably just shy of 5 years. Had a good time. It was fun. But, man, going through like the State Police Academy, when it's all stress inoculation and, they're exposing you to the worst of society so that you can get accustomed to stress and situations. And I tell you what, one of the jokes that I heard, and then actually end up living it out a little bit, but one of the jokes I heard, somebody was killed, murdered or whatever, and it was a bloody scene. And immediately afterwards, after the investigator looks at it and takes pictures, she says, "Hey, you want strawberry shortcake or something like that? That is a play on what we just seen, right? Something that resembles." But it is all to get you to become like numb to it almost, right? Like you start to build calluses early on for the trauma.
That's why the inappropriate joking has become part of the culture.
Yeah.
Because if we really think about what we see and experience and hear, it's a little too much. And so taking the edge off, and so an outsider can see it as callous, hurtful, disrespectful, but at the same time, it is a coping mechanism.
It is.
And there needs to be others, but it's a way people in our field, in the military, survive.
Yeah, it is. It is. And we're going to continue on, but I really, I was thinking about this interview and us getting together and having this conversation. And one of the things that really struck me and I wanted to bring up with you was that the coping of the stress and dealing with things, the reality is, and using like, inappropriate jokes or whatever to cope, because it brings laughter and light in the situation. But the reality is we were never designed for this type of drama. It was never God's intent and purpose for us to endure this type of thing.
And not in an ongoing basis.
Exactly. And so for us to even have to build the callus or kind of like fortify our hearts in such a way so we can cope with it is because it's not a normal or natural thing to endure. Right. Especially on a level that first responders and military personnel endured on. So I just wanted to say that, like, we weren't cut out for this. This is not what was intended for us. However, the Lord is faithful to give us the strength we need.
I agree.
Second question for you. What are some signs that a first responder might be struggling with trauma or PTSD, even if they haven't acknowledged it themselves?
That's a great question. Some of the things I look for is, first thing is when they start to notice changes in themselves or other people do. Often it's other people. Spouses, sometimes you're more irritable. You're not talking as much. I've noticed that you've been having nightmares, or you're withdrawing from family. And, I had somebody come to me recently, and young guy, mid-20s, firefighter. And after there was a fire up in the Northeast that he knew some of the people that were involved, it triggered some things in him. First thing that happened was he was having difficulty sleeping. Then he started questioning everything. Am I in the right career? Am I with the right person? Am I, like, all these things that he had never questioned before. Yeah. Some irritability. Crying episodes, or depressive episodes, or anxiety when they never had anxiety. So there are little things, but they all came at once. Yeah. And then it's almost as if some of them kind of become paralyzed. And the common theme that I've seen, especially in the last 6-8 months with the people I've been working with is they first ask me, will I ever feel better again? Will I ever feel like myself again? And my I joke with people that I used to be a hopeless dope fiend, and now I'm a dopeless hope fiend. So I love to build hope. I mean, in our practice, my motto is I want to be a beacon of hope for those who have lost hope. And so in instilling that and then walking through the trauma treatment process, all those people have thanked me because within a period of time, that hope was restored and their resiliency came back, and they've been able to keep going.
That's awesome. So for me, when I first left law enforcement, I told the Lord, just give me 1 year to be a regular guy. And I meant that in a few other ways too, but one of the things was to just not be a cop anymore. And so I took a year off, and what I noticed was in those first 3 months, of being separated from law enforcement, I woke up more angry every morning. And I worked night shift majority of the time, so I dealt with the troublemakers, all right, and you just knew you was going to have some type of aggression or something, And so I woke up every morning for the first 3 months, that built up aggression and just, mad, irritable. And it was probably in the third month that I was like, yo, what is going on with me? Like, why am I like this? And I realized that it was because I was missing the roughage, the just, the nightlife of being a police officer. And I realized, man, this is what my wife was probably talking about when she said I was, acting a certain way or meaner or whatever the case is. Like, I understand now, if this is who I was, the first three, my wife had to wake up to me all those years I was a police officer. But for the first 3 months of me separating, I feel like I was waking up to me every morning. And I'm like, this ain't right. So, so I understand what she means now.
Houston, we have a problem.
A major problem. So, it affected everything, man. It affected the way I love and treated people. It affected everything. And so, anyway, I felt like the decision that I made to not go back was actually a good decision, man. I didn't have to worry about becoming something other than, if that makes sense, because the things that we're talking about now, I didn't even consider those things. It was just the culture, the lifestyle, and it's just what it is, right? And now I understand a little bit more. What are some of the barriers first responders face when seeking mental health support, and how can we work to overcome these obstacles?
Yeah, that's a good one. We were discussing a little bit of this earlier before the show started, and one of the barriers is if, you hear this word cultural competence, and in my field, cultural competence is important in terms of the culture you're dealing with. And culture doesn't necessarily mean race or any of that, or where you grew up or all of that. It can also mean like the culture of first responder culture versus other cultures. And this last year, I completed a certification, which is being really a public safety and first responder certified clinician. And part of that process, a huge section, was on helping people understand the culture. Wow. And the cool thing for me was, because I've lived the culture for 20 years, I got it, right? But I loved seeing what they had in there for those that don't know the culture, because obviously the people who created that training, Cortico, they know the culture. Yeah. And so by the cultural piece, is the barrier is that most first responders typically won't go talk to anyone. Right. They might talk to a chaplain. Yeah. They typically won't talk to anybody outside their circle. Right. And then when agencies or cities or whatever, they have typically for their employees across a broad spectrum of types of employees, they have like EAP programs, which are really good. In one sense, they're really good because it gives the person that needs it some free therapy before they use their insurance and all of that. Unfortunately, most EAPs don't have culturally competent first responder trauma-informed therapists.
Yeah.
So when they go, the wrong questions are asked or they're not understood. Sometimes when they share what they're dealing with that therapist, it's traumatizing for the therapist, and they've now lost their audience. And so then they don't go back. And that's probably the biggest barrier when I look at all this is that. And so having that cultural competence, having the background, and then incorporating that in can help reduce that barrier. And then I think the culture in the fire service, in law enforcement, is don't talk about it. And as you deal with older school command staff, that's some of them, not all, that's still the culture. And then you have this newer culture that is okay or maybe open a little bit more, but then the resources aren't there. So we're trying to break down those barriers. Did I miss anything on there?
No, I mean, that was good because, you know, we was talking about this earlier, like you said, and, you know, I brought up the whole, when I was a specialist in the military, I just wanted to be with the guys and just be a God-fearing man, a man of faith, but a soldier, you know, and because I was sharing my faith and kind of got a reputation of having this strong faith, and the chaplain approached me and him shared, and he was like, yo, you should be a chaplain. And I was like, no, I shouldn't. And to be honest with you, he kind of like, oh, how dare you, you know? Like, he
you don't want to be of the cloth?
Yeah, no. But it was my reasoning behind it I thought was a very good reason. And years later, it proved to be true. I told him, I said, no, I'm a soldier. I want to be with my guys. We're going to be in the trenches. You're not there, right? We have to go get you. We have to go find you in the heat of the battle. I want to be there. I want to be able to pray with my guys while we're returning fire. I want to be able to be with my guys when after trauma or whatever, doing an event. There's that camaraderie. There's that brotherhood. There's all of those things.
The unspoken things.
The unspoken things, right? I don't have to go back and tell you my experience. You were there. We shared it together. And so the culture you're speaking of, like, it's a part of that culture is sharing the experiences. If you don't share in with us in this hardship or whatever, then you're an outsider. Yes. And so I explained that to him with less words, of course. And he just kind of like, okay, whatever, walked away. But, you know, years later when we were deployed, it actually proved to be true. The chaplain couldn't even come out there where we were a lot of times. And so here I am running pretty much a church that I built with just guys was like, hey, look, let's do a Bible study. And so it proved to be true and factual. So
I've walked that out in the department I work for now part-time, in that it's not that the first responders, the firefighters, were standoffish or cold when I first came around, but they just weren't real open. Right. And they weren't going to be, and I didn't expect them to be, and I didn't pry, and I just kept showing up. Mm-hmm. And what I kept showing up. Mm-hmm. And I kept showing up and hanging out at different stations, riding with them, going on calls, being aware of the calls, until now I am one of them. Yeah. And I have the added ability to have this pastoral care piece if they need it, but also the clinical side to help them when they can't figure out how to help themselves. Exactly. And it's all in the course of a day, right? Just a normal day. Yeah. The guys reach out to me now that never would have before, but they do now. Yeah.
And I just want to add this. We kind of said this earlier, but I want to make sure that it's recorded so the chaplains aren't like, what did he just say? Yeah. But, you know, there's a place.
It's just not for me.
Yeah, there's definitely a place for it.
We need them.
We need them. But there is what Paul says. He says we are many parts but one body, right? So I'm okay with being, you know, the hands and the feet perhaps, right? I'm okay with the battle buddy in the field. I'm okay with being the guy that's with them, because if something happens, buddy, I would gladly escort you to the chaplain who has more access, more resources that he can connect you with. And I've actually done that too. Dude was dealing with an issue. I was like, look, I'm pulling you out of the field. We finna go to the chaplain, because I know if it was me, this is what I would want. So I'm finna pull you over. So, there's definitely a place for them. But
I want to give a plug to a great local organization called First Responders First. Lonnie over there and his guys and gals. It's a chaplaincy program, and they reach out to the local police departments and they walk with them through stuff. And they've been invaluable in doing the pastoral care, chaplaincy care that's needed. And it's like we're the hands and feet. Yeah. I may not be the hand, they may be the feet, but we're still part of the body.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
Cool. So shout out to those guys. Yeah. I want to ask you if you can discuss some evidence-based therapeutic approaches that are effective in treating trauma among first responders, or just anybody at this point. I know we're focusing on first responders, but
evidence-based treatment is good. I mean, talk therapy. I mean, so if we talk about talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy is helpful to a degree in terms of taking what I call ANTs, automatic negative thoughts, learning how to reframe our thoughts, especially in the face of trauma. That's a practical piece. And then there's some other therapeutic, one of my favorites is EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Basically, it's a way of helping the mind and body know that the event is over. It's less talking, more processing. And so that's a tool that I use with a lot of first responders, that you could be in a year of talk therapy and not cover everything that would be helpful, and in 1 or 2 sessions of EMDR get to the same place. Wow. And so, and I don't have the answers, and it gives the Lord an opportunity to show up. There's narrative therapy, there's exposure therapy, there's all these different things, but there's a lot out there we can do to help.
Yeah. Amen. That's amen. I want to pause real quick, because me and Jesse was talking about you. I don't know if you've seen the episode, but we was talking about. So if y'all remember the show with Jesse, this is our friend we was talking about, the smart guy. He used a lot of big words there, so I just want to hit the pause button and say this is our smart friend that we was telling you about.
I heard a little bit about it. I haven't gotten a chance to see it yet.
Oh, well, we talked about you several times. Like, we got a friend that works in therapy. Yeah. How important is peer support? And we alluded to this, but how important is peer support in the recovery process of first responders? And what does effective peer support look like?
Peer support, when used properly, is extremely helpful. And there's some great organizations that offer peer support training in the Charlotte area and throughout the state. And it's something I'm involved with it's like not at the state level, but I've been utilized to do things in Raleigh, different things. And it's a way of training first responders of some of the things that are important to know when meeting with their brothers and sisters. And there's a peer support network that I'm on that you can, there's a group me or a text, and let's say a firefighter is struggling with substance abuse in a rural county. They text people that are in that county, hey, can you go see so-and-so? Yeah. And they go out and make house calls, and it's not therapy, it's not counseling, it's peer support. Okay. There's a level of confidentiality, but it keeps it within the organization. Then you can spread out and offer clinical services if they need it. Okay. But what's better than having a brother or sister show up at your door that you do life with, or that knows what you do? Right. You're going to most likely talk to them.
Exactly.
Right? And so there's a lot of peer support networks around here. And, we had something go on with one of our firefighters recently, and the brotherhood and sisterhood that came out of the woodwork to support that family. It's just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Me and Jesse talked about this a little bit about, how important having brothers and sisters when you're going through a trial or something like that. You need to have that support system. So I have a group that I name Brothers of the King, but it's my small group. Jesse is a part of it, but that's what it's all about. Iron sharpening iron. So we get together. I believe that as iron sharpens iron, men make man more effective. Yeah. And so that's kind of what our motto is, and that's what we live by. And that's even in supporting each other outside of the group, outside of church. Like you call me, I got your back. You know what I mean? And that is important. And I think that goes along with the peer-to-peer support system. Just knowing somebody on your level got your back, right? I'm gonna roll these next two questions up kind of together. The only thing that separates them is the organization, so like your job, your workplace, etc. And then the other part is the family and communities. But the main question is, how can organizations create a culture, or how can families and communities support the mental health and encourage first responders or anybody to seek help if they need it?
Yeah, organizationally and within families, having somebody, not me, but somebody like me that can bridge those gaps can be really helpful. Yeah. And oftentimes, I've seen there's ways that we can pull in spouses. I've had spouses contact me because they know what I do, concerned about the firefighter, right? Yeah. And then there's a conversation that can take place. It's about communication. It's about talking and knowing what resources are out there. Yeah. And the more we talk about it, the more education happens and more people are aware of resources, and there are. Yeah. There are resources. There's peer support, all different ones. There's organizations like the North Carolina Firefighters Association, which if a firefighter can't, or retired firefighter can't afford clinical services, this organization will help pay their co-pays or pay the self-pay rate for the family, for the firefighter to get services.
So family needs to not be afraid to make a phone call, but they need the resources. Yeah. I'm just summing up what you're saying. Yeah. They need the resources. Yeah. So in the military, every year there's always a brief that we're like, we got to listen to the same brief. But thank God for it, because every year they're pounding the same information. Yeah. Yo, you need to do this, you need to do that. And then before we deploy, they bring the families in. They give them the same information to make sure everybody are aware of the resources that they have. That's very important.
Pulling the family in is important because they're living the other half of that life.
Exactly. And my wife is strong. First of all, let me just give a shout out to my wife. You can see I'm in the dining room. I rearranged everything. Josh can attest to that. I rearranged everything. And she's like, you do your thing, baby. I support. Amen. So, like, shout out to my wife, man. And when this is released, it's going to be Mother's Day weekend. So shout out to all the mothers out there. My wife, my mother. God bless you guys. We love you. We love you. Let's look at long-term recovery from traumatic events or trauma, right? And how can one, so beyond first responders, even though we love our first responders, we're talking about them, how can we build resilience to cope with future trauma?
I think part of it, resilience is important, but learning that the struggle is normal is also important. And there's an organization called Boulder Crest Foundation that has a program called Struggle Well. And it is, I just went through it this past winter, and it was so good. It's peer-led, and it's about how to build resiliency and also acknowledge the struggle, be transparent about it, and know that you don't have to do it alone. Wow. Because we can't. Right. When we try to do it alone, it's a long road. So long-term recovery is building resilience, learning that the struggle is real and normal. And also, the cool thing is I'm a firm believer that PTSD is not a life sentence. I've seen people healed from their past trauma, which builds resilience, which builds strength for them to show up another day, and they don't have to keep reliving it.
Amen. I believe it 100%. Actually, I'm going to throw in this plug because I'm going to ask you to come back. I hope you will.
Yeah,
I'm going to ask you to come back because
we're not going to get to it all today.
I wanted to talk, maybe it'll be the whole show, but the connection between the psyche and the spiritual. I think
I do a lot of work with that because I've seen people come in that have dealt with the spiritual, yet their mind and their body don't know the event is over, or vice versa. They've dealt with the physical, and the mind and body know that it's over, but spiritually they're not in a place that they can get better at that point, and some other changes need to happen.
Yeah. So I'm definitely going to bring you back. So we're going to have that discussion. So I just got 2 more questions for you. First of all, I got a lot of young people who are like thinking about joining the military. They ask me about it, and I'm all for it. Go ahead. You know, when people say thank you for your service, I want to so bad say you can thank me by finding a recruiter and signing up. You know, that's the best way to thank me.
Yeah.
But what advice would you give to someone entering into a law enforcement or the first responder world or military world as far as how they can protect their psyche? You spoke about resilience and normalizing the struggle. Yeah. That's perfect. That's awesome. That's what my last guest said, Maury. He talked about that, realizing that you're not the only one that went through it.
Yeah. So I think the big thing I would say is you're going to deal with old school and new school people in this career. And the old school you can learn a lot from, and the new school you can learn a lot from. And it's important. Yeah, you can be the hero and all that, but you can't be the hero if you don't take care of yourself first. Yeah. And so learning how to be aware of what signs and symptoms of the stress reaction are, so that you can handle it. So having skills, coping skills, grounding techniques, so that as things come up, you manage them and you minimize the cumulative effect, which so many first responders, oh, that one didn't bother me. Oh, that one didn't bother me. Yeah. You get to that one call and it's like, now they all bother you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
that's awesome, man. Last question, and is I think you've been dropping us dimes all day as far as resources and places that we can turn to, but do you have any books or anything that you can recommend that people pick up? And
in terms of building mental resiliency, I really love Craig Groeschel's book, Winning the War in Your Mind. Okay. Craig Groeschel, pastor, Life Church. They created the Bible app. There's a Bible study on there called Winning the War in Your Mind, and it gives practical tips on how to take every thought captive, utilizing scripture and restructuring your brain, and which is a lot of work I do with people. There are many trauma-informed therapists out there. If you're looking for therapists, make sure you search trauma-informed. Obviously, they need to be licensed, all of that, but EMDR and different things like that. We have a practice here locally. We refer to other practices as well. Psychologytoday.com, you can put in like Christian counselor, EMDR, trauma, and your insurance, and it will pull up the ones in your area. Wow. So there's if you're dealing with grief related to what you're doing, there's grief.com. If you want to learn more about EMDR, EMDR.com. So those are a few. Okay,
awesome. Man, I know you're pressed for time, you're a busy man. But again, I appreciate you for coming out and being with us, man.
Yeah.
God bless you,
Thanks
bro.
for the opportunity. I can't wait to come back.
Oh, yeah, you're coming back.